Atlantis took her final breath and slipped under the sea. She took many secrets with her. Humanity had reached a peak during the Atlantean era, a high point of consciousness that we have yet to fully understand. The truth is, we live in the fragments of the Atlantean culture. We live in an echo of this sunken world. And we are developing ourselves so that we can not only recreate that higher society, but recreate it in a more balanced way. We are building our way back to that exact initiation point with faculties, perspectives, and abilities that we had not yet developed during that Atlantean phase. In the last few videos, we have been exploring the Sleeping King mythos. We have learned that there are higher human beings that have reached an exalted level of initiation. Part of that level of initiation is to perform a great service for mankind. It is to hold space for humanity, to offer their own mind, their own body for humanity to use as humanity attempts to evolve out of the lower planes. These beings' very mind and body and essence becomes a substrate for humanity to reference and use, for humanity to be inspired and transformed by. The initiating forces for this world, these higher human beings, are there constantly with us. They are part of who we are, but they do not assist us through random visits or dreams or prayers exclusively. Their being, their soul, is integrated into the very reality in which we live. Their essence is woven directly into this world. We, humanity at large, would not have a pathway out of this plane without this sacrifice, without their sacrifice. Now, this does not mean that we are not powerful. We are. But we are also the recipients of immense love and assistance from great initiates that have already overcome the exact phase of initiation that we are now confronting. Their minds project downwards and form a bridge into higher worlds for humanity to lift themselves up. Their minds form a healing pathway for humanity to follow. It is as though they walk with us each day by offering us the opportunity to evolve, the memories to remember who we are, to use their very mind and body as a stepping stone of our own evolution. This phenomenon has been portrayed in countless fairy tales and myths as sleeping kings or sleeping heroes, and even sleeping queens appear here and there. In esoterica, these are known as the masters, or the brotherhood of the white light. Ancient cultures knew that higher, advanced human beings took on archetypal forces for humanity. They called them by the names of planets or the seasons, or even by their unique cosmic ray or cosmic energy. A pillar of ancient brotherhoods was to build a temple in direct ratio to the body of a man, symbolizing that we are living inside higher beings. Ancient cultures and various secret societies have retained the secrets of the ancient practices of Atlantis, and they practice them religiously, keeping a vein of this culture, of this memory, and this energy alive in humanity. It is today's spiritually degraded and materialist society that has not only forgotten these truths, but lost the actual ability to comprehend them. We have to be able to grasp this, to understand this sort of esoteric mystery, riddle. Our mind must become multidimensional, which means we must not demand that these ideas fit into a linear and materialist ideal that the world tells us we need. Let's go deeper into how the human embodiment and projection of higher cosmic rays or archetype works. The Christed individual. When a human being reaches a certain level of initiation or spiritual advancement, they reach a point where they have the option to serve humanity in a very particular way, through the direct embodiment of cosmic forces or cosmic rays. They will personify an entire cosmic principle when this occurs. They will do so not through depersonalization or the loss of self. They will not release their identity or sense of self to do this. They will do this through knowing themselves as an individual, knowing themselves to such an advanced degree that they come full circle and can merge with massive cosmic impulses without losing themselves or shutting down. Their unique spirit becomes so purified that they can merge with other forces without losing themselves. This is very different than being an unconscious channel. This is the conscious merging back into the higher spheres with your personality purified and your individuality intact. This is the formula for the Christed human, the Master. The bringers of light. As they have walked the earth, these masters, and been just as human as you and I, their consciousness has the ability to translate these higher forces into a digestible and relatable spectrum of information. It is as though they speak two languages at once, the lower language of this earth and 3D material world, but also the higher realms. Thus, they become an active bridge for mankind, the initiators of mankind, and also the protectors of mankind. This embodiment ritual must be done at certain intervals of time to preserve and strengthen the connection between Earth and the higher worlds. In short, part of the human ascension or human evolution process is to consciously rejoin with the higher worlds, and perhaps even offer yourself as part of that rejoining. Let's examine this principle through the works of Rudolf Steiner. The principle of the embodiment of cosmic rays by advanced initiates is seen in Rudolf Steiner's lecture on Atlantean oracles. This is lecture 6 from 1909, the Atlantean oracles, the post-Atlantean sanctuaries of initiation, the baptism by John. The spheres or planets seen by men corresponded to the origin of their descent. There were human souls who, let us say, were descended from Mars when they, in keeping with their development, proceeded to combat the Luciferic influences in their astral body. They were led to a higher grade of clairvoyance, to a good, pure seership. And they beheld the higher spiritual beings in the spheres from which they had descended, the Mars sphere. Souls from the Saturn sphere became capable of seeing the Saturn beings. Others from Jupiter or Venus saw beings of those planets. Each soul saw the region corresponding to itself. But the most advanced among the human beings, those who had survived the lunar crisis, were able to prepare themselves gradually to see not only the spiritual beings of Mars, Jupiter, and Venus, but also those of the sun itself, the high sun beings. Having descended from the various planets, the initiated could not perceive the spiritual spheres of these planets. You will therefore understand that there were institutions or schools in ancient Atlantis in which the descendants of Venus were taught the Venusian mysteries. If we give these schools a later name of, quote, oracle, we may say that in Atlantis there was a Mars oracle, in which the Mars mysteries were investigated, a Saturn oracle, a Venus oracle, and so on. The highest of all was the Sun oracle, and the highest initiate of the Sun oracle was the highest of all initiates. What we are learning here in this excerpt from Rudolf Steiner's lecture is that the oracles of Atlantis were embodying specific large streams of consciousness for mankind. They were translating it, being mediators of it, and thus linking worlds. Each oracle would express the specific language, karma, and life impulse of that planet or sphere. They would keep humanity in step with what was going on in higher planes. These details would be, in fact, aspects of Earth's own evolution, as each planet is an aspect of the Earth in different times or different states of initiation. Together, the oracles would hypothetically form a perfect compression of time and space, a perfect system of communication for humanity. We can also see another truth with Steiner's last line, which reads, "The highest of all was the Sun oracle, and the highest initiate of the Sun oracle was the highest of all initiates." We learn through that one line that humanity was engaged in a multi-dimensional system of initiation through channeling and embodying the planetary spheres. Today, this still forms the root of all initiation, as each human being has stored within them the planetary spheres and aspects of themselves that, through certain cosmic alignments, can be reinitiated into their consciousness, that can be awakened into their consciousness. Through this line, we are seeing an order of initiation, a structure of initiation for humanity, the cosmic initiation structure of humanity. In this lecture, entitled The Spiritual Economy, given in 1909, again by Rudolf Steiner, we discover the hidden mystery of the human cosmic initiation process through the ancient mystery schools. They were not just churches and not just schools, but rather a combination of both. Those who searched for truth could find both religion and wisdom in mystery schools. Here, religion and wisdom were one. Using a modern word, we can characterize the concept of these cultic centers, the mystery schools, by the term, quote, Atlantean oracles. This is the name given to them by the European mystery schools, but originally they were called something entirely different. In the Atlantean oracles and their centers of wisdom, spiritual life was differentiated in the same way that external knowledge in the areas of trade and professions are subdivided into external life today. There were various branches of spiritual investigation and occult wisdom in ancient Atlantis, but everything in those times depended on different conditions. Wisdom varied from one oracle to another according to the capacities of human beings and their external environment. A connection existed between certain human capacities and certain planets. That is, certain mystical occult capacities were connected with certain planets. Therefore, on the Atlantean continent, we should distinguish between the oracles of the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Our present capacities, too, developed out of the cosmos, as did our Earth, and they are in each case tied to different planets and their influences. On Atlantis, people who were suited to develop this or that cognitive capacity were chosen from the population and assigned to one of the 7 oracles. Of the 7 oracles, which were named after the 7 planets in ancient Atlantis, the Sun oracle stood out from all the others, but next to it, the Vulcan oracle prepared itself in secrecy for its future task. Each of these oracles had emanated from the cosmos according to its capacity, but there was one center in which the capacities of all 7 oracles flowed together, and it was here that the wisdom of the 7 oracles in Atlantis coalesced. The adepts of the center of the Holy Sun oracle had been initiated into the mystery and service of what today we know as the sun. We should not forget that the physical sun is only the external expression, physiognomy, the body and the garment of the spiritual life of the exalted sun being. The great initiate of the Sun Oracle journeyed to the other Atlantean oracles to collect and take with him the 7 etheric bodies of the greatest Atlantean initiates. And then he attracted, through his wisdom, a number of human beings who were to become fit for their coming culture. He taught these humans who were gathered around him so that they became increasingly more capable and pure. What followed may be called an art. After some time had elapsed, it became possible to incorporate the 7 more important etheric bodies of the 7 greatest initiates of the ancient Atlantean oracles into 7 human beings. In regards to their egos, their power of judgment, and so on, they were simple people whose existence had no significance from an external point of view. However, they carried within them the 7 most highly developed etheric bodies of the 7 most significant initiates. These etheric bodies had streamed into these people, thereby enabling them to exude the great, powerful visions and truths of evolution through inspiration from above. Thus, they were able to speak all of this exalted wisdom. The great initiate sent these 7 bearers of wisdom to India, where people still had a sense and an understanding of the spiritual and of the spiritual worlds. In India, human beings still had the feeling and the consciousness of having at one time emanated from a primordial spiritual world and having been born from the womb of the Godhead. Therefore, the whole physical world appeared to them as Maya, as illusion, and they longed to return to this world of gods, to those divine spiritual beings with whom they had once lived. To such people, the 7 bearers of wisdom could speak. They were called the Holy Rishis, and it was they who inaugurated the dawn of our post-Atlantean culture. The people who had preserved for themselves the consciousness of and the longing for the spiritual world with its divine spiritual beings were given the opportunity to learn more about this world and to find the way back to it. In our state of deep materialism and forgetting these lines of holy consciousness and these traditions, we have forgotten our own process of initiation out of this plane. The intricate stellar pathways of resurrection and mastership are snuffed out as we demand that they adhere to materialist reasoning rather than open ourselves to their sleeping memory within us. But we are now remembering, now that we have been guided by higher souls that were once called the oracles of Atlantis and the 7 holy rishis. But where are they today? What is our language for them now? How do we describe them? Are they the 7 sleepers of Ephesus? Are they the 7 sleeping kings? The Knights of the Round Table? The Apostles of Christ? The Great White Brotherhood? The Brothers of the White Sun? Masters? Steiner also reveals a specific ritual that involves a death-like sleep. This is the esoteric basis of the ritual of the sleeping kings. It is this mystery that leads to the transmutation of all spirit and matter. To begin with, the pupil underwent a long course of preparation, consisting not of study and learning, but of that which we call meditation, and of other exercises to develop self-possession, inner tranquility, and a dispassionate attitude. The preparation was designed to fit the astral body in every respect to become a citizen of the spiritual world. Finally, when the right moment had come, and as a final act of this preparation, the pupil was thrown into a death-like condition, which lasted 3.5 days. Whereas in Atlantean times, the etheric and physical bodies were so loosely joined that the former would be withdrawn with comparative ease. It was now necessary that the candidate for initiation should be thrown into a death-like sleep in the mysteries. While this condition lasted, he was laid in a kind of coffin or bound to a cross or something similar. During this time, the initiator, or hierophant, as he was called, had the power to work upon the astral and especially the etheric body, for during this procedure, the etheric body was withdrawn from the physical. This is not what happens in sleep. For them, the physical and etheric bodies remain in bed, while the astral body and ego withdraw. But here, in this concluding act of initiation, the physical body remains, and the etheric body is almost fully raised out of it. Only the lower portions are raised out of it, and the candidate is then in a death-like condition. Everything that had been learnt by meditation and the other exercises was now impressed upon the etheric body in this condition. In these 3.5 days, the initiate actually roamed through the spiritual worlds where spiritual beings live. At the end of the 3.5 days, the initiator called him back again. This is to say, he had the power to awaken him. The latter now brought with him the knowledge of the spiritual world. He could behold that world and announce its truths to his fellow men, who were not yet ready to behold it themselves. These teachers of the pre-Christian times were initiated into the deeper mysteries. They were led by the hierophant during these 3.5 days, and were living witnesses of the reality of spiritual life. That is, of the truth that behind the physical world there is a spiritual world to which man belongs, with his higher principles, and into which he must find his way. The form of initiation I have just described reached its climax in the period immediately following the Atlantean cataclysm. But in the course of time, as the union between physical and etheric bodies grew increasingly close, the process of initiation became increasingly dangerous. Men were becoming ever more accustomed to the physical world of sense with their full consciousness. Indeed, it is the purpose of evolution that man should be accustomed himself to live in the physical world, with all its inclinations and sympathies. The great progress of humanity consists in the fact that man actually develops this love for the physical world. This practice of oracles embodying and representing specific archetypal cosmic forces is the same concept of the sleeping kings. And the death-like sleep is very similar to the process of stasis or suspended animation and the various rituals that surround it. The oracles receive the information from the particular planet or ray that they are attuned to. The advanced humans in stasis, the ones that are asleep, send the information and radiate the information. Or you could see the oracles as the lower dimensional or lower density incarnation of the humans in stasis. This work is incredibly important to the advancement of mankind, as without this connection, the planet can slip into destructive chaos. The destructive chaos that is embodied in the lower astral plane and eventually the eighth sphere. This is why, up until recently, oracles were sought out and trained, not so that leaders may gain power and riches, but so that the messages of the masters could be known, so that the world would not fall into the chaos of the lower worlds. This connection is sacred, and it cannot be faked. How is this done? How do we connect with it? It is how we live. The kings I speak of are real. They exist in a kind of physicality that is no different than our own. They have just released themselves from ego to the point that they hold the folds of time and space together for us. But you are them, and they are you. To get where they are and be who they are, they became vehicles for Christ consciousness. And Christ consciousness now moves through them. And they have fully surrendered their bodies and become vehicles of Christ, embodiments of Christ, Christ consciousness. Their bodies and minds taking on all energies that occur here, all pain, and also all divinity. I will end this talk with a quote from Paul the Apostle. And he says, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me." May we all have the courage to be emptied of our ego and of our pain, and in that emptying take on more and more of our spirit, so that we may one day be powerful enough to take on more than ourselves, so that we may one day live in true service to Christ consciousness and to humanity. Thank you for joining me today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, share this material. And I'll see you next time.